Welcome to the show, everybody. I have a guest coming on today. His name is Alden Schaub. He's a comedian, host. Dude, you do so many things, but thanks for coming on, man.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We were talking offline. That feels weird to say. We were talking off camera.
In the RL.
On the we were talking in real life, and you were saying like you're from the Midwest. So, what part of the Midwest are you from?
I'm from Traverse City, Michigan.
Traverse City. Okay, cool. Growing up, I would always spend like my winters. So I grew up in Costa Rica, but I would spend like 3 months out of the year, basically the winter between Canada and Michigan. So I have a very like deep connection to Michigan. So never been to Traverse City. I think I've driven past it though. What was it like growing up in Traverse City?
Well, it's like a tourist town, but it's mostly farms and like I grew up on a cherry farm, and then there's apples and plums and stuff, and it's like a small town. I mean, not super small. Like there's 2 or 3 high schools, and there's a little community college, but peaceful. It's nice.
Did you? How far is that from the UP?
So about an hour.
An hour? Okay, so it's close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like my cousins lived in Farmington Hills, and that was about a 3 or 4 hour drive from there. So it was always like a little trek up there.
Yeah, the wrist of Michigan is where all the bigger cities are, and then as you go north, it gets more and more sparse. But Traverse City is sort of a little dot of city. I mean, it's becoming a little more urban, but not.
Yeah.
It's still a small area, I think.
Yeah. What's Traverse City known for?
Well, they have the Cherry Festival.
Okay.
That's a big thing. So there's a week around the 4th of July where they do music and events, and they have some celebrities come in, and they do the Blue Angels. They come over and do an air show.
Yeah.
And then they got the fireworks for the 4th, and they got the fireworks for the Cherry Festival.
Okay.
So that's a time you want to get out of town if you're a local.
Yeah. How long was the festival for?
I feel like it's maybe 10 days or something.
Oh wow, that's a long thing. Okay. Did you were a cherry farmer? Did your family like do like something special for that?
Well, what's funny is that originally the Cherry Festival was at a time when the cherries were actually ripe.
Okay.
But they wanted to move it closer to the 4th of July to combine those things into one big tourist thing. So the cherries in Traverse are not ready.
Okay.
And so they get cherries from Washington a lot of the time.
Really?
So what we would do is we thought it was really funny to get a bunch of cherries that weren't quite ripe yet.
Yeah.
And just sell them, as kids.
Yeah,
So we're selling people a cup of cherries that isn't quite ready to go, but the people that are there, the tourists, don't know anything. And so they're just eating like cherries that are about a week early.
Okay. So I feel like you and my wife had a very similar upbringing. So she grew up in like northern Minnesota, but she would like they had like a strawberry farm, and then she would sell strawberries and stuff like that. So I think it's like a very similar upbringing.
Yeah.
But so did you do a lot of the farming yourself, or you just like helped out in other ways?
Well, during harvest time, we would help out. Well, and it's changed a lot. So, like, when I was really young, they would hire pickers that would come and pick all the cherries, and then that's all. It's changed. Now it's all mechanized.
Okay.
So when I got a little older, they had a machine that you'd have to manually pull out these tarps, and then there'd be another machine that'd come and, like, shake the tree. And then now it's gotten more advanced where all that's done in one machine.
Okay.
So to harvest the whole thing, you only need about 4 people.
Okay.
And it used to take maybe 40.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's a big. And like when I was a kid, if you picked a whole lug of cherries, which is like, how much is that? Maybe be like 30 pounds of cherries or something. You'd get paid like 50 cents.
Yeah.
Or and I think eventually it got up to like $2.50, but then at some point it's all tractors. So,
okay.
I know how to drive a tractor. And
yeah. All the fun stuff.
Yeah, or like a forklift, or it's mostly. You start doing it, and it's fun for like half a day.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh. Well, and I worked at a winery up there, too, so they have like, it is. You don't think of Michigan as being a wine region.
Yeah.
But because of the Great Lakes, and there's certain areas that are sloping the right way, so then they have a bunch of vineyards.
Yeah.
So I did that for a summer, and then, but it's a lot of work. I mean,
yeah,
it's no It wasn't.
It's not a picnic, no.
Well, it wasn't what I wanted to do, but
Yeah.
it's like the family business. Then you end up doing it.
Yeah.
And it's good money when you're doing it, but then you're just doing it all day for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. It's a tough way. It's one of those jobs that's like very like manual and like labor intensive, right?
Yeah.
So what was what was your school experience like over there?
I don't know. I just had like I don't know. I played sports.
Yeah.
I did football, track. I did powerlifting in the winter. Skiing. I don't know. I was always a good student.
Yeah. Well,
I tried to take the hardest classes I could.
yeah. What was your favorite sport?
I don't know. Football was fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
was like a good lineman.
Mhm.
We always would lift. Well, it's fun to be part of the group.
Yeah.
So all the linemen would get together after school and we'd be lifting weights and just kind of having a good time.
Yeah.
And then, you're in shape and it's fun. And,
Yeah.
I was a guard, so I pretty much did that throughout the whole time.
Okay. You're like one of the jolliest people I've met.
Oh, thanks.
You seem like everybody loved you.
Mm.
Yeah. Was that the case?
Yeah, I think most people do. I mean, there's some that do not, but I don't know. I just like people.
Yeah.
I think that comes off. Like when you look at somebody, you can see it right away if they want you to talk to them or not.
Yeah.
And part of that's body language and part of that's their mind. If they're thinking like, oh, I mean, even like I wear bright colors.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, people feel invited to come and say something to me.
Yeah. Yeah, because like every time I see you, it kind of like brings a smile to my face.
Well, there's something to be said for doing what you want to do. I mean, there's a lot of people who have to do things because they have obligations. Like I don't have kids. I don't have a serious job. I don't have a lot of obligations.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty free. So that makes me happy.
Yeah. No, I mean you can tell. So, when you were in high school, was there like any moment in time where you're like, man, I can't wait to get out of here, or you really enjoyed living there?
I liked it. I mean, and then I don't know. School was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot.
Yeah.
So for me, school wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I read all the time, and so a lot of the stuff. I felt like I had kind of a net of information that made it easier to bolt on new things.
Yeah.
Like some people don't like reading, and I think it makes it harder to learn. I mean.
Yeah. I was one of those people growing up. It's not that I didn't like to read. I just didn't want to work, I guess. So I didn't really. I wasn't interested in stuff, and it took me a long time to realize that reading can actually be fun. Like I think I was in like 10th or 11th grade where they made me read. Like the teacher made me read one of the books. And I was like, I didn't read it, but I read the Spark Notes. I'm like, this is actually really interesting.
Oh yeah.
But I was one of those guys. I don't really want to study. I'd rather play video games or do something else. And it made it harder for me because I wasn't like the best student. Mm. But you're telling me like you were a really good student. What kind of books do you like to read?
Oh, now more science fiction, and obviously I read a lot of books about comedies, theory and stuff, and then biographies. Well, like my parents read to me at a real young age. Mm-hmm. That was always done in the house.
Yeah.
So then I remember I must have been like 12 or 13, and I walked into this bookstore downtown, and I got Malcolm X's biography.
Okay.
Because I had been told, biographies are the way to go. Mm-hmm. I probably shouldn't have read that book at that age. Cause it had a lot of really adult themes to it.
Yeah, it's a dark book.
Well, and it was really fascinating because like my life was completely different than that, and so that was like a big. There's a whole world out there, and then I read Mad Magazine all the time, religiously. Like, there was a comic book shop down the street, and somebody had traded a box of Mad magazines from the 70s.
Yeah.
And I saw that, and I think I bought it for like $20. And I went through that book. And you would think a kid that's like maybe 14 doesn't get all the references. And that's probably true. But I would sit there and say, okay, there's something funny about this.
Yeah.
Because that's why it's in this magazine. So I should strive to understand it,
So have you been interested in comedy since you were a young kid?
Oh, yeah. But I didn't have the idea that I'd be a stand-up. Mm-hmm. I mean, that seemed like very foreign, But I always thought I always liked humor and consuming humor and making people laugh and stuff.
How long ago did Mad Magazine stop being published?
Well, maybe like the mid 2000s. It got bought by DC, and then they do like reprints of old ones now.
Okay.
But I don't think maybe they're doing it quarterly or something.
Okay.
But it really is for young adults. I mean,
Yeah. It's a very adult themed magazine. I don't think I've ever like read one. I've just seen like the front page like plastered all over the place and things like that.
Well, they'd have different things like snappy answers for stupid questions.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd have somebody ask a stupid question, and then they'd have 3 snappy responses, and they're always like really offensive.
Okay.
Like Spy versus Spy was a big one.
Yeah.
But then they do movie parodies. That was a big one. Historical events, they would make fun of it.
Yeah.
I read the biography of the guy who created it. Well, and this is something that I brought into today, but what he would do is he'd have all of his writers,
Mm-hmm.
he'd call them the Gang of Usual Idiots.
Okay.
And so then if they contributed a certain amount of articles, they would go on this trip.
Yeah.
And they'd go to some really hard to get to place that was really obscure, and it was harder to travel back then.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that increased their ability to come up with new ideas.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, that's good. So then in my mind, I was like, I'm going to travel a lot when I get older so I can be funnier.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's pretty interesting. So, like, you have a very magnificent beard.
Oh, thanks.
How long has that been growing?
Well, I when I first moved to Austin, I started growing it. And then I watched Ralphie May's video, and he's like, you shouldn't have any facial hair.
Mm-hmm.
So I shaved it off, and then I started growing it again maybe a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's back to like this, like
Do you like trim it every once in a while?
just on the sides a little
Yeah.
bit. And then I shave like this part.
Yeah. So you don't get like the straggler hurt.
Yeah, it gets
Straggle.
all, I don't want it to go up to my eyeballs, I want it to,
Yeah. How old were you when you like started shaving?
maybe like 16.
Okay.
I don't
Oh,
know.
really? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I had I had little wispy whatevers, but like I
Yeah.
had a goatee throughout high school, and then sometimes I'd have a mustache.
Okay. Because I started shaving when I was like 12, but I didn't have the actual facial hair to do that. I just like my cousins and everybody else was shaving, so I wanted to be like them.
Sure.
So I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do this. And so, but when people would ask me about it, I would lie because I knew I didn't have anything. So I was embarrassed about it.
Mm.
But I think around 15, 16 is when it actually something started to show up when I would actually shave. But, so you said you grew the goatee. Was it like a fully grown in goatee or was it?
It's like a chin strap.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
What? Because I feel like your beard is so thick.
Oh yeah, now I mean, well, it's funny because my dad, when he was in school, he went to business school, and the professor said, I would never do business with somebody with a beard.
Really?
And so when he heard that, he shaved it off, never wore one again. And then when I moved to Austin, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to live here forever. But everybody seems like they're pretty pro beard. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll just grow one, because then it seems like, it's like taking on some of the local color.
Yeah.
And then I just liked it. And even when I shaved off my beard, my girlfriend was like, you
I
should
don't like
probably, yeah. When I met you, you were a cool beard guy.
Yeah.
You should grow it back. And I said, oh, yeah, I kind of like the beard also.
Yeah, I think when someone meets you, they kind of like the way you were at the time.
Yeah, they kind of imprint that.
Yeah.
Mm.
How old were you when you finished high school? Did you go somewhere else, or did you stay in Michigan for a while?
Well, so after high school, I graduated in 2003,
Mm-hmm.
and so then I went to community college for 1 year in Traverse City,
Okay.
and then the next year I went to Grand Valley, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
So I lived there for about 3 years.
Okay. What was that like?
It's a medium city. It's a little bigger than, let's see, it's probably bigger than Round Rock, but it's probably smaller than Austin, somewhere in between.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just like a nice place to live, I think. I mean, there's some rough parts, like East Grand Rapids is. Well, that could be different now. I haven't been there in a while, but
Yeah.
no, it was nice. It was like a state college, know, and I'd go. So I studied economics in school.
Mm-hmm.
So the business school was downtown, so I'd spend some part of my time there. And then the
Yeah.
main campus was kind of out in the sticks.
Yeah. What was that the first time that you'd been outside, from living in your parents' house?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, well, I did take a trip to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
My girlfriend's sister was studying abroad,
Mm-hmm.
so we flew down there, and we were both like 17.
Okay.
And I'm like, you probably wouldn't do that today.
Yeah.
It seems like it's more. I don't know if I'd let my kids do that if I had kids at like 17.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gamble, I'd say.
Yeah. So, anyways, that was really an eye opener because
Mhm.
like we went into some really small areas and
Mhm.
again that was one of my aspirations. I was like, oh yeah, a trip to Mexico. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I took a mission trip out to California with the
Mhm.
church I was in,
Mhm.
and then we were only out there for like 2 weeks. But
Okay. When you say you weren't Mormon, right?
no, so
Yeah.
my mom was Methodist,
Okay.
so I was involved with the Methodist church.
Okay.
And they would do a thing where they'd take all the youth kids who wanted, and they'd go out to California, and we just like worked at a soup kitchen and did
Yeah.
some little projects,
Did you go to like a Methodist school or something like that?
Not really. Like when I was really young, I went to Catholic school for
Mhm.
like till like third grade,
Okay.
and then my dad decided he didn't want to be Catholic anymore, so then I started going to the public school.
Okay.
And then my mom's like, well, if we're not going to be Catholic, I guess I'll go back to being Methodist.
Mhm.
So then she would go to the Methodist church.
Okay.
And then she kept trying to get us to do it. And I was like, oh, I don't know. It seems kind of silly, but,
Yeah.
well, mission trip, though. All right. Well, that sounds
Yeah, I'll
pretty
get
good.
a trip
Like,
out of this.
yeah. I mean, they were nice, and it was pretty,
Mhm.
like, my uncle would call it, like, Christianity light,
Yeah.
because they're just playing music, and they're not really.
Mhm.
I mean, you go into the church, there's not even any Bibles or anything.
Yeah.
So, like, but my mom's like, well, I'm just here to be part of the community and stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, well, that makes sense. I mean,
Was there a big jump for you between Catholic school and private public school? Like, was there like something that you would say that just stood out for you, or was it pretty much just the same?
yeah, not really. I don't know. It's just a new school, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I didn't really take Catholicism that seriously.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm baptized and I did my first communion.
Yeah.
But then when my dad's like, well, we're not going to be Catholic anymore, I was like, oh, I guess that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he would be considered a non-practicing Catholic
Yeah.
or whatever. But
Yeah. I think a lot of I consider myself to be in that
Mhm.
in that group because my mom was very religious and she wanted us to go to church every Sunday. So I wasn't in like a Catholic school,
Sure.
but there was like catechism, I think it's
Oh,
called.
yeah.
I had to do that like once a week, every week until I had my first communion and stuff like that. But I never really like I believe in some higher
Mhm.
power, but I like, and the stories in there are pretty cool and whatnot. But the enforcement of it, I never really liked. It was always like it always left like some bad taste in my mouth.
Well, it's strange because like my dad was so Catholic. Like when he was a kid, altar boy,
Mhm.
went through the whole thing, and then he kind of got fed up with it.
Yeah.
And then my mom, she was involved in the church, but she didn't really know anything about religion.
Yeah.
So she'd be like, Alden, you should read your Bible and you should have more faith and stuff. And I'd say, well, okay, Mom, can you tell me the passages of the Bible that Jesus wrote, and I'll actually go ahead and read those.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't admit that she didn't know anything about the Bible. So she said, well, you need to talk to your pastor.
Yeah,
So
okay.
to me, I was like, oh, this is just nonsense. Like she could be involved in this thing and not even care about it. She's just there to be with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is a big community. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, I guess that was like your way of like hanging out with groups of people because there was no other way to meet people, I guess, or like maybe your neighbors or something like that.
Well, and we're missing that in society.
Yeah.
They say that there's a lot of these third spaces
Mm-hmm.
are being eliminated.
Yeah.
And so in a way, the church is more important.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't go now, but like the family she was nannying for,
Mhm.
we went to go to the Christmas service and stuff.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, those people are getting together.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's nice to have people that you know that you like see at least once a week or something like that, just to hang out. I don't know.
Well, that's what I do with trivia. That's like, people think that trivia is whatever, but like that's the value of trivia. They
Yeah.
have their friend group. They're busy. They can't get together, but we can get together for trivia for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like, similar to church in that way, where it's like, I mean, the religion's important to some people and some people it's not, but getting together is what's important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I like about comedy because like I don't do anything else other than just work and comedy.
Yeah.
So, but I work from home, and people that work from home generally have a hard time with it because they don't get to hang out with people. But I'm out and about just about every day.
Yeah.
So it's like I love working from home because then I can do my other stuff a lot easier. I don't have to be in traffic and all that crap,
Mm-hmm.
and then just go out and do the comedy stuff. So it's in a way, I don't want to say it's like my church, but in a way, it's kind of like a way of air quotes congregating, right?
Yeah.
Because like you're hanging out with a bunch of people that you see every day, and there's something to that, I think, because
You're part of the subculture.
yeah.
Well, even people that are thinking about not doing comedy anymore, they still want to be in the mix.
Yeah.
There is something that's nice about that.
I mean, look, you meet a lot of cool people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously there's weird comedians and whatnot, but
Sure.
but you meet a lot of cool people. So when you said you were 3 years in Grand Rapids, right?
Uh-huh.
After that, what was your mind at after that? Like, what were you thinking?
Oof. Well, so I graduated in like 08 and that was when we were having a big recession.
Yeah.
And so I applied to every kind of job. Also, I didn't really realize that if I was going to study economics and be an economist, I really should have probably gone to grad school.
Yeah.
But I was like, it's not really. So I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, originally my plan was to go and teach English in South Korea. And then that ended up falling through. So I was like, well, maybe I'll get a job at a ski resort.
Mm-hmm.
So that, like, okay. So I started applying to different ones, and I got one in Utah.
Okay.
So then I moved out to Utah, and I lived there for like 3 years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I lived in Utah for 3 years too.
Oh, yeah?
What part? Like Park City?
Yeah, so I was just down the street from Park City in Heber.
Okay.
That's where all the employee housing was.
Okay.
And then the next 2 years, I lived downtown Salt Lake.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'll dive into this in a little bit, but you mentioned something that caught my attention. So you said that, well, first of all, when you said that you studied economics, immediately, so I had an economics teacher in high school that, like, the moment you said that just jumped out of my head. Like, he reminds me a lot about you.
Oh.
So he's got like kind of like the same hair, glasses, and he didn't have like such a majestic beard as you do, but he liked to grow his beard every once in a while, and I think he had to shave it when it got too long, but he would do that. But he was also a very fun teacher. He's still alive, but he's like a Scottish guy, so he like they have this very dry humor. And I feel like you have that dry humor as well in some ways too.
Yeah, maybe that's why I was attracted to it. Well, I think economists are sort of oddballs a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they do call it the dismal science, And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of little jokes in it.
Mm-hmm.
People are always like they used to have something they'd call the maximum utility gift exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing in economics is a thing of maximal utility is cash.
Yeah.
So like there's nothing as good as cash because it's like universally transferable.
Mm-hmm.
So the joke was that the economists would all get together at Christmas and just trade $10 bills.
Yeah.
And like to an economist that's super funny.
Yeah.
But to most people they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know any of this stuff. Like, so there's a lot of jokes like that in it.
Yeah. Do you still find it interesting? The
Oh, yeah.
economics? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when you think of studying something, like let's say you're a history person,
Yeah.
you learn all about history and then you have sort of a body of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of true of economics, but really I think the value of economics is you learn these tools of analysis.
Yeah.
So, and also there's a lot of writing involved and a lot of reading, but a lot of the things about economics are non-provable, and so a lot of it's theoretical. And so then you're doing thought experiments all the time.
Yeah.
You're thinking about things in weird ways. And, well, now that it's gotten a lot more mathematical. So, like, again, if I would have gone on to grad school, I would have had to do a lot of, like, statistical analysis and stuff. And I was just like, oh, that's no good.
Yeah.
But they're just thinking about things a lot. And they're like, why is this way? Well, then, or like one of my capstone projects was we're going to try to predict the Oscars. Well, that seems like a silly thing, but there are actually economists who would try to do that. So you like build a mathematical model, and you say, okay, if this movie grossed this much, what percentage is that? Meaning that that person's going to get the best whatever actor or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just an interesting way to think.
Yeah. Do you feel like the way that thinking sort of like informed your comedy in a way?
Well, yeah, the way I put together things is definitely analytical.
Yeah.
When I look at putting together a joke, I want to know why it works, and I'll try to think of the tools of comedy.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, this is this kind of joke, or this is a misplaced focus, or this is a triple, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think some comics don't do it that way. But I'm like, I think of each of the things as a tool. So I'm trying to look at my joke and say why. Like they say, don't dissect the frog. I don't agree. I think that knowing why it works leads you to being able to do it,
to reproduce it.
Yeah.
That's well, I don't want to dive into comedy just yet, but
sure.
But no, not that there's like a format. It's just like usually that's what I end up talking about all the time.
Makes sense.
So, another thing that I want to dive into this a little bit later. So, but another thing that you mentioned. So, what made you think of like, oh, maybe I should like work at a ski resort? What brought that about?
Well, I did not have anything else to do, and it was winter was coming. I was living with my dad, and he had his girlfriend there, and like I was like, I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
I applied to work as a bread delivery person, and so I was the 300th application for a job that you had to get up at 3 a.m, bring your own car, and you're going to deliver bread for $8 an hour.
Wow.
And I was like, this is just awful.
Yeah.
Like, I would be happy to take any kind of job.
Yeah.
But then I thought, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do nothing.
Yeah.
And I thought, it'd be fun to work at a ski resort. And maybe I'll just do it for the winter, and then I'll come back here and I'll be in the same spot I'm in. But I won't be like sad. I will have done something. I'll met some people and seen a new place. And that was all there was to it.
Yeah.
So then when I was looking at different resorts, I mean, I also didn't know anything about Utah. But Deer Valley had employee housing.
Yeah.
And so that was sealed the deal. I'm like, that'll be way easier than trying to find an apartment.
Yeah.
So like I got in my truck, I had $300, no car insurance, and I just like drove out there.
Yeah.
And that was great. And then I ended up doing it the next year too. And then the third year I just ended up working at a nightclub.
Okay.
So at some point I was just like, I guess I'll just move back to Michigan. I didn't really have anything going on out there.
Yeah. Okay. What you also mentioned, so you and you're still boyfriend and girlfriend, right? You and Tina. How long have you guys been together?
Yeah, like 4 years. Okay. 4 or 5.
Is she from there?
She's from Cleveland.
Cleveland. Okay. Okay. You love the Midwest, huh?
I don't know. There's something. Yeah.
Something there.
Well, I met her down here.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I was hosting trivia at a bar in Bee Cave.
Okay.
It's called the Ginger Man, and she came to the game like every week. And then at some point she's like, oh, I really like all the music you're playing,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh,
yeah,
okay, well, do you want my email? I mean, just like totally dense,
yeah.
And then I was like, oh,
Yeah.
So yeah, then we started dating.
That's nice. That's pretty cool, man. So what was, you said 3 years doing the ski stuff, and then you moved to Salt Lake. What was how different was it living in the ski resort area as to living in Salt Lake?
Well, everybody who's in the employee housing is a degenerate. They're transient people that are just looking for something to do. Some of the people actually kind of went on a circuit, so they do skiing in the winter, and then they'd go work for the national parks or something.
Okay.
And they just kind of went around. And then there were people were coming down from South America who were on these visas who would come just for the winter.
Yeah.
So they would work at the ski resort in Utah in the winter, and then they'd go back down and have another winter. They'd work down there. And then there were a few local people who just, needed a job. So it was quite a group of people.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of oddballs, really.
Yeah. So you weren't living full time the whole time you were in the first 3 years in Utah?
Well, the first year I came back to Michigan after the season, and I just did that's the year I worked at the winery. Yeah. And then I went back because I was like, well, the harvest season's over and I got nothing to do again, and that skiing wasn't so bad, So I went out there, and then my plan was to live out there pretty much permanently. And so then I got this job at a nightclub, and I got a job delivering trampolines, and I got a job doing rental, apartment finding and different things.
Yeah. Well, did you start doing comedy in Salt Lake or no?
No. The only time I did stand up until I kind of started was I went to this place in Grand Rapids called The Bob. and they had an open mic night,
Mm-hmm.
and I did like 3 minutes.
Okay.
But also, I had some experience with public speaking
Mm-hmm.
because I was the president of the investing club, and then I did some like radio, like at the community college.
Your voice is very very soothing, so I could see you being a radio guy.
Oh yeah, if you have a deeper voice, it's certainly an asset for radio.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you enjoy doing the radio stuff?
Yeah, it was all right, but I kind of got a weird slot, so I was there from like midnight to 3 or something.
Oh shit! Okay.
And I'm pretty sure nobody was listening. It was like a community college station.
Yeah.
So I'd play a little music, and then I'd be like, okay, here's the next one. And like, so when I was thinking about that, I'm like, this isn't very satisfying because there's no feedback.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just stopped doing it. So that did make me think, well, maybe live entertainment's better.
Yeah.
Because then, it's more interactive.
Yeah.
But even then, I didn't think like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a stand-up.
Yeah. It kind of like you kind of tumbled your way there. I feel like.
Well, there's like that sampling period. So some people kind of know what they want to do earlier in life, and I certainly didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always just like, well, I'll try this. How's that go?
Yeah.
And I'd get to a point where I was like competent,
Mm-hmm.
but then I'd think, is this what I want to do?
Yeah.
So then I'd go, well, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
Or I'd try sales, or I'd try whatever, bartending, and I'd be like, well, this isn't bad.
Yeah.
Like I was a good bartender.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, oh, I guess I'll do something else. Like,
It's cool that you always looked at it as, is this what I want to do? Because like you're like, well, I'm going to be doing this for a while. Do I want to be doing this for a while? So like you always had that that long-term look at it, scope, I guess.
well, like, the difference between being positively motivated and negatively motivated?
Yeah.
So for most of my working life, I was negatively motivated. I would get a job that I didn't really want, but I was like, I better have a job.
Yeah.
Then my motivation was, I want to do something other than this. So then I'd get into the next one, and not with a lot of thought, just thinking,
Yeah.
I just don't want to do what I'm doing. And then I'd do that for there was a chain of those kinds of jobs, And then at some point, I started listening to Tony Robbins because I got a job selling phones.
Okay.
And it's all about, if you're going to be good in sales, you got to be motivated and stuff. So then that's when I turned it around and thought, okay, well, what do I want to be doing?
Yeah.
Instead of just get out of this. you
Yeah.
know? So then I got a job at a pawn shop. And like, that doesn't seem like a great job.
Yeah.
But in my head, I was like, I want to be a pawn shop owner. Maybe that's something I could do.
Yeah.
So then I took that job.
It was a proactive way of looking at it instead of just trying.
Yeah. So that didn't, from the outside, it didn't look like there was much different. But
Yeah.
my mindset had changed.
Oh,
I want to work towards something.
Yeah.
And that didn't end up working out.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, I want to do this trivia thing.
Yeah.
So then that was like moving toward a thing you want to do.
Okay. That's funny you mentioned Tony Robbins. I'm a big fan of Tony
Oh,
Robbins.
yeah. I think he's really transformational on a lot
Yeah.
of things. I mean,
Yeah. So after you lived in Utah, what did you go somewhere else before coming to Austin? Or
well, so I went back to Michigan for like 4 years.
okay.
I think 4 or 5 years. I just did, again, just oddball jobs. Like by that time, a lot of the farms had been sold.
Okay.
And so there wasn't that farm work. And that was also very seasonal.
Yeah.
So I worked at a feed store. I worked selling phones. I worked at this resort as a banquet waiter and a bartender.
Yeah.
Just whatever kind of jobs came about. Because again, the city's not super small, but it's not.
It's
so
not huge.
It's sort of inefficient. You just kind of take the job that you can get.
Yeah.
And then I did that for a while, and it was funny. There's people that worked at this resort their whole life, and I looked at that and I was like, oh man, they're like institutionalized.
Yeah.
I thought that, again, I thought to myself, this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
But it's not bad work, and like, I mean, it's better than farming.
Yeah.
Because I could interact with people, and most of the time it was fun.
Yeah.
Because everybody's there to have a good time at a resort, so at least they're pleasant.
Yeah. It's cool that you always looked at it. Well, it's better to have a job than not, because a lot of people look at it the other way around. I don't want to have a job.
Oh man, I've had times in my life where I'm completely idle, and it's bad. You get depressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, I was like, okay, even if I don't like this job, it's better than not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to do things.
Yeah, man. Where were you doing the pawn shop stuff?
Oh, it was in Round Rock.
Round Rock. Okay.
Yeah, so I was in Action Pawn #1.
Okay.
And I was a new pawn broker, and I learned about that business. And it's actually a very good business.
Yeah.
But I will say this: it's very depressing.
Yeah.
Because
most of the time people come there because they don't have money or something.
yeah, I mean, let's say you have some kind of financial problem, like you got to pay your cell phone bill. And so you've asked your sister, you've asked your, priest, you've gone, you don't have credit maybe because you don't have a credit card.
Yeah.
Or you're unbanked.
Yeah.
So this is the last place you want to go. But if you bring in your stereo or whatever, then you can get that cell phone bill paid. And so from the perspective of the pawnbroker, the owner, he's like, well, we're providing a service.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not exactly what they want.
Yeah.
But we are solving their problem.
Yeah.
And so, like, to be a good pawnbroker, you have to be empathetic because, they're not happy to be there in a lot of, they're under bad circumstances a lot of the time. And so a good pawnbroker will be somebody who's sympathetic. Yeah. Well, the problem is you end up taking all that stuff home, if you're good. Yeah. If you're just like a unfeeling, uncaring person, you're not going to be a good pawnbroker.
Yeah. Okay. I see it. So how I feel like you and I are the same. How old are you?
I'm 39.
39? Okay, I'm 37. We're pretty close. Because when you said you graduated 2003, I'm like, oh, I graduated 2005. So I'm like, okay, we're very similar in age. And I feel like we have similar references as well. So when was the last time that 4-year span of in Michigan, was that the last time you were there? And then did you move from there to here?
Yeah.
Okay. How long have you been in Austin?
Like 6 years.
6 years? Okay.
Mm.
What brought you here?
Oh, yeah. So my brother, I have 2 younger brothers. So my middle brother, he had been trying to date, and it was like slim pickings. Because in Traverse, what'll happen is if you're young and you just graduated, you're going to move somewhere to start your career.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times you come back to have your family because it's a small town, And so a lot of the people that were still there were just kind of like either divorced or they were, troubled people or just, and there's just not as many people to date,
Yeah.
So he got this idea in his head, let's go somewhere where there's more women. And then so he picked some cities. He's like, okay, there's Denver, there's like Boise, we could go to, Austin, we could go to, Atlanta or something. And then we just like talked it out and we're like, well, Austin seems like the way to go.
Yeah.
And then we just like moved down here.
Is he still here?
No, so he moved back after about 6 months.
Okay. You didn't like it, I take it?
Well, yeah. Well, so in Michigan and like Traverse, there's more wilderness. So like for him to feel normal, he's got to be able to access the woods and stuff.
Yeah.
Where here, it's like you go out in the green belt, there's people all over, and to him, it's not enough solitude.
Yeah.
Like he would say, if he goes on a hike and he sees somebody during that, then it's like a failure.
Yeah.
He wants to literally just have that time to be by himself.
Yeah. I can understand that. That's especially like there is some nature here.
Yeah.
But it's not like I lived in California. Well, everywhere I've lived has a lot of nature. I think this is the place where there's the least. Growing up in Costa Rica, you're in a rainforest.
Yeah.
Even if you're in the city, the city's designed to preserve the rainforest feel. Well, I lived in California, like in the LA area, and even if you were in they call it the concrete jungle for a reason, right?
Sure.
But it's very easy to get out of that and just be very the mountains are right there. Then I lived in Utah for almost 3 years, but I didn't live in Salt Lake. I lived in, are you familiar with like Zion National Park? So I was like 30 minutes from there.
Oh yeah.
30 minutes from St. George. Do you know St. George? No. So it's like so St. George is like the one of the most southern parts of Utah. But everywhere it's a different kind of nature because it's the desert, but like the mountains and the rocks and all that are very beautiful. It's similar to Salt Lake, but very different at the same time because Salt Lake has all those mountains, but they're also covered with a lot of trees, and then you get all the snow. There's barely any snow. Like it snows like once a year where I was, except in Zion it did get quite a bit of snow. And then moving here, ironically, it's the place that reminds me the most of Costa Rica because of the way the trees are like sparsed around. And there's a few hills here and there. There's no mountains, honestly, but it does remind me of that. So is there anything about this place that that reminds you of home?
Not really. I
No.
mean, I'm used to living by lakes and stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, I grew up right on the lake,
Yeah.
so there was like, I mean, I would swim every day.
Mhm.
Obviously not in the winter, but like,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's about it. I mean, I can see why my brother got so claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Because, like, say the city, once you get out of the city, too, a lot of it's private land.
Yeah.
So there's really nowhere to go.
Mhm.
So I think you feel like,
Yeah, like he couldn't do anything.
yeah. Where I'm just like, I could take it or leave it. I mean, I
Mhm.
do miss skiing and I do miss swimming all the
Yeah.
time, but for me, it's more fun to be in a place where there's like more creative people.
Yeah. What was it like when you came here? Because I know there was like this is like one of the at least the live music capital of the country. They say the world. I don't know how true that is. Probably very true. I don't know, but that was like the main focus here, right? Before, yeah.
I guess. I mean, I didn't really do that much music stuff. I just did favor.
Mhm.
You know, we played frisbee golf, and
Mhm.
you know, I started doing trivia for myself when I moved down here after about a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm not really into concerts.
Yeah.
To me, I feel like it's a lot of standing.
Mhm.
You know, or just sitting. I mean, I saw Weird Al when he came.
Yeah.
Um,
How was that?
oh, it was really good. Emo Phillips opened,
Okay.
and then he did a bunch of new music, and then he did some of his classic stuff.
Yeah.
It was good.
Okay. I love Weird Al.
Yeah.
I've never thought about going to see him live though. It must be pretty.
Oh yeah,
fun.
well I didn't. Tina's like, oh, Weird Al's coming to town. I'm like, well, that'll be cool. Let's
Yeah.
check that out.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie they made?
Yeah,
That
the
was
recent one.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
That was very fun. Yeah. It's kind of like true, but at the same time, it was very exaggerated. So
Yeah,
it was very fun.
That part where he's like having the music off against Jack Black.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. That's a very fun movie, man. It's funny that what was that released on? Was that like Roku or something like that?
Yeah, it wasn't like, well, it might have been in theaters, but I think it was more or less an independent one.
Yeah.
But I mean, so many celebrities in it too.
Yeah, no, that's a jam-packed movie. It was great. It's one of the there's not many comedy movies lately, but I feel like that one's one of them. That's like really, it's like a legitimately good comedy movie.
One, two, I really admire Weird Al because again, he's been doing it for a long time. There's nobody in his way, or he's not like, he's at a level of fame where he could probably still walk around.
Yeah.
I mean, people know him certainly, but
Yeah.
he's not. I don't know. I feel like you're working to build up this big thing, and then all of a sudden you're just not popular anymore.
Yeah.
Well, in some sense, he was never like mainstream popular. He had a group of people that are just really into his stuff,
Yeah.
and then everyone else just doesn't care.
Yeah.
That to me is great.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause then he can just do whatever he wants.
And still gets to do his thing.
Yeah, and so he's had a career kind of like that the whole time. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's he's one of those guys that I think a lot of people know of him at least. Like if you say Weird Al, like they've at least have some sort of like they've at least heard one of his songs or something like that.
That's pretty great.
Yeah. That's cool. So what point in time are you thinking like, "Oh man, I would like to do comedy." Like what brought that about in your life?
Well, I mean, like I said, I always thought of myself as being funny, but I never thought that was like a career or something you should do. Well, my dad always said, you should go into business. You should have some kind of business, or you should be in investing or whatever. And then my mom was a painter, and then she also worked as a nurse when I was younger. So like the idea of being an entertainer was kind of foreign.
Yeah.
So I kind of resisted that for a long time. I was like, this isn't practical. This isn't something you can do. So what got me into doing comedy was like, I started doing trivia back in Michigan.
Yeah.
So I met this guy, his name is Eric, and he came into the convenience store I was working at. And he told me a joke. And then I told him a joke. And then over time, we got darker and darker. Dirty, and then he created this group on Facebook called the Internet G-Spot, and it was the worst memes. The account kept getting banned.
Yeah.
Actually, I had to become an administrator of the group because his account kept getting banned.
Really?
So like the filthiest stuff. So then we kind of became friends there, and then one day he came in, and he's like, "Yeah, I host trivia up here at this casino. If you ever want to check it out." And I was like, "Okay." So I started playing like every week at this casino. It was out what was that one called? It's the Ottawa and Chippewa Casino or something.
Mm-hmm.
So then, it was fun. I was like, he looks like he's having a good time. We would win a few like prizes, So then one time he comes into the store and he's like, hey, one of the other trivia hosts is going to quit because she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be interested in doing trivia hosting? And I just thought, no, I mean, I never thought about it, but he's like, I think you'd be good. You seem like you're personable.
Yeah.
You've got a sense of humor. The rest of it you can learn. It's not that hard and it's fun. And so then he got me a show and it was at this really small bar, maybe like a half hour outside of Traverse City.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd have like 10 people show up on like a Monday.
Okay.
So I started doing that. And then, so the guy who actually ran the trivia company, he lived in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never met the guy in person. But then he's like, well, hey, I got this other show. Do you want to do this one in Northport?
Mm-hmm.
And that one was 45 minutes away from Traverse.
Okay.
Like, okay, so then I got 2 shows. Then he's like, oh, do you want to do this one at the Leland Lodge? Okay. So then at some point I had 4.
So you're a traveling trivia host.
Yeah, so like I would have my Sonoma and I'd put in, so you have like a little speaker system and you have your laptop and then, so he would, so it's like part of a franchise. It was called Team Trivia.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they'd send you the questions. So I'd drive out to wherever and I would do the show. And so then you start to get a little following.
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, Traverse City is like kind of a small city, but then I'd go out to these really small, like if I went to maybe something smaller than Dripping Springs or something.
Yeah.
So like I'd go to Saturday night at this little bar and it would be the only thing going on in the whole town. So I'd have all kinds of people coming in there. And, when you first start doing trivia, you're just kind of reading it off. But then over time, you sort of gain a little bit of a persona and there's little in-jokes and different things. So then at some point, I'm doing all these shows and I finally I did that for like 4 years, but I was doing my regular day jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
And so my dad came to one of the shows and he's like, wow, people really like this, why don't you do this as a job? And I was like, I just don't know if there's enough money in it, and this and that. And he's like, well, you seem like you're enjoying it, but whatever. And then when I moved down here to Austin, I told Dave, I'm like, yeah, I can't host anymore. And he's like, oh, geez, that's a lot of shows I got to give away to somebody. But so I came down here, and I just thought I wasn't going to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got that job at the pawn shop, and I was like, oof, this is depressing.
Yeah.
So then I thought, well, maybe I could do that trivia for myself. I'll start a little business. And so I had my friend Randy, he's actually passed now, and then his son, they lived near this bar that they were regulars at. And they're actually from Traverse City.
Okay.
So like he would live in Traverse City during the summer, and then he would live in Austin during the winter. And I didn't know this before I moved down here. But then I talked to him, and I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting that trivia going again. He's like, okay, good. I'll talk to the bar, and I'll get you going on it.
Yeah.
And nothing really happened. And then all of a sudden, he's like, yep, okay, we're going to get you going on Monday or whatever. What I didn't know at the time is he had went up to the bar, and he said, listen, this guy's good. Let's get the trivia going. And they're like, I don't know. And he's like, I'll pay for the first month.
Oh, really?
But he didn't tell me, So I'm doing it, and it's going. So then it started going, and I was like, oh, this is great. So then I had like 4 shows here in Austin, different bars. Now I do like the Barton Springs Saloon, and I do the Lucky Duck, and I did this bar called the Skull Mechanics, and then I did the Ginger Man, and that's actually where I met Tina.
Yeah.
So then, the pandemic happens and all that, but I was like, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has that self-authoring suite. So I was kind of like, what am I gonna do now?
Yeah.
So I did all that writing and stuff, and so I kind of was like, am I gonna go back to grad school and study? I thought maybe psychology or something, or do I want to become more of like an entertainer person? So I didn't look at trivia as like I want to have a big trivia business.
Yeah.
I thought what I like about it is the performing. So I thought, okay, well then what is it that I could do performing wise to like satisfy that? So then I looked at improv and I looked at stand up and I was like, oh, well, I'll do stand up, And so then that's what I've been doing.
That's how you got started.
Yeah.
when you're now you have like your own trivia business,
Mm-hmm.
so you come up with the questions and all those.
Yeah.
So how do you come up with that?
Well, it's more art than science, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have prompts that I use to kind of give me some ideas
Mhm.
because the way mine's written is random.
Mm-hmm.
So every category should be different. And like, I'm not trying to cater to an expert.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have a wide breadth of
Yeah.
stuff, you know. So, well, like I was looking at some corn cobs the other day,
Mhm.
and it got the idea of like some of this corn can be popcorn,
Mm-hmm.
but can all corn make popcorn?
Mm-hmm.
So then I would write a note to myself, you know, true or false, can all corn become popcorn? Well, it turns out it can't.
Yeah.
But so that'd be a good trivia question, you know. So a lot of the stuff comes from me just like looking at stuff.
Just curiosity in general.
Yeah, like I was looking at some peanut butter jars, and I seen that some of them have a blue for crunchy and some of them have red for
Mhm.
crunchy or for smooth or something. And I looked and I said, okay, well, is that true of all of them? It's not. So then that's a bad question.
Yeah.
Because if you just look at, you know, blue is always crunchy and red's always smooth, then
Mhm.
it turns out it's not true.
Yeah.
Or like even Peter Pan peanut butter is yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow's the top. Or like I was watching Jack Timmons do one of his bits,
Mhm.
and he's talking about an oil spill,
Mhm.
and there's ducks out there in the ocean.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, there are no ducks in the ocean. They had to bring ducks in from somewhere and cover them in oil and then clean them off with the soap, you know.
Yeah.
And so when he said that, I thought, well, is that true?
Yeah.
Like, are there saltwater ducks?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing I never thought about.
Yeah.
And then I found out there are.
Really?
So then, yeah, so I was like, oh, that's good because it's really simple to understand what I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
But then the idea of if it's true or not, it doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
So then that becomes good because then the team will kind of discuss it, you
Mhm.
know. And there's like, it's not obvious. I mean, there is a correct answer, but it's not like obvious, you know.
Yeah.
So like that would be considered like a good trivia question.
Okay.
You know.
How long have you been doing the trivia? Like 8 years?
So I've been hosting trivia for like 11 years.
Okay.
And I've been writing for myself for like 5.
5? Okay. Does the writing of those questions, does that help you at all with writing stand-up?
Oh yeah. Oh well. Okay. So to me, writing a good trivia question, it should be like one sentence.
Mhm.
And when you look out into the crowd after you've said it, you should see a look of comprehension.
Mhm.
Because if the question's not worded correctly or if it's ambiguous,
Mhm.
people will literally on their face be like.
Yeah.
So then you realize, okay, that's not a good question because some part of this was either misunderstood or it wasn't clear.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing when you write a premise.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So you like, so my thing is, people come into the bar for trivia,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be anybody.
Yeah.
I have no idea who's going to be in there. So I've got to write a question that any person can understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same with stand-up. When you walk into a comedy show, like at our level, nobody knows who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know who's out there.
Yeah.
So, and they don't know anything about me. So I've got to say something to them that they understand immediately. Because
Yeah.
if they don't get it, they're not going to laugh. Or
Yeah.
if they do, it'll be for some other weird reason.
Yeah.
So to me, that like informs the way I write comedy.
Mhm.
Because I'm trying to, like my good premise is like, oh, I got a screw in my tire.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
From there, I'm in, they're in it.
Yeah. Everybody knows what you're talking about.
Right. So that to me is a good premise
Mm.
because it doesn't take a lot of explanation.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell people what a tire is or a screw.
Yeah.
So it definitely is informed the way I write for stand-up. I mean,
So coming back to the economics portion of it, so the way like questioning everything and making sure that like the analytical portion, and then now with that trivia, it's kind of like did you know that by doing those two it would inform your writing for stand-up, or did you like little by little just maybe like piece it together like maybe this is like that?
I don't know. I kind of noticed it later, I
Mhm.
guess. I didn't really think of it that way, but I was like, oh, I'm writing a lot of these jokes like I would write a trivia question in the sense that it's easily understandable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, and I didn't know I'd be doing trivia when I studied economics either.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, well, I mean, we go through our lives and we can't question everything.
Mhm.
We don't have time. And
Yeah.
we don't have the brain power.
Yeah.
But I can as a trivia writer
Yeah.
because that's what I'm looking for. I want something that is super obvious if you actually looked at it,
Mhm.
but people are just kind of not, you know.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, man. So you've pretty much have been here before this comedy boom and things like that. did you start doing stand up before that happened, or was that one of the reasons that like sparked it in you?
I had no idea all this comedy stuff was going on when I moved down here.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like a complete fluke that I live here even.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, so I after doing that Jordan Peterson stuff, because actually my brother Gary turned me on to him.
Yeah.
You know, and I wasn't. Well, I had been listening to Rogan, I guess,
Mhm.
before I moved down here, but not as much as I do now. But
Yeah.
like, you know, I'm certainly aware of him and
I
stuff.
mean, you were here before he was, but
Yeah, but even before I moved down here, my brother was like, "Oh, you should listen to this Joe Rogan. That's
Yeah.
pretty good." And so I was like, "Oh, Elon Musk's moving down to Austin, and
Mhm.
Joe Rogan's moving down to Austin.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, you know."
suddenly everything's starting to be more popular around here.
Yeah, but I didn't think of it like. I mean, a lot of people came here specifically for comedy.
Mhm.
I was just happened to be here, and I was doing something that was sort of adjacent.
Yeah.
And then, because I could have easily ended up doing improv or something.
Yeah.
You know, but
Did you ever try improv?
well, so I went to Cold Town and I did the sketch writing class.
Mhm.
So they had a thing where if you intern with them, you can get a discount.
Mhm.
And so I signed up for Improv 101 and sketch writing.
Mhm.
And then they said, well, the internship only applies to one class. So I said, okay, well, I'll just take the sketch writing class. And then I never actually ended up taking the other improv class because then I went and did my first open mic actually at Cherrywood.
Mhm.
And then I was like, I did it one time and I didn't do it again for a year.
Yeah.
Because I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it was all right. It went all right.
Yeah.
But
That's more common than you think.
yeah, I think that's actually, they say that, you know, you get up there and you're nervous and whatever. I don't even remember what the jokes were and stuff.
Yeah.
But then finally, I think I started going to OPA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I started being like, okay, well, I'm actually going to see about this. You know?
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting, man. So, I'm curious about your writing process. So, did the sketch writing inform you anything with regards to stand up?
Well, yeah, there's certain ways of there's certain like jargon involved with writing sketches.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about like the button
Yeah.
and like, you know, the game, how you heighten the game, and there should be some stakes involved, and you know, what a character should do. Is this a character-based sketch?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a fish out of water sketch?
Yeah.
So that helps me with my Instagram reels where I think about like,
Yeah.
because I used to watch Mad TV all the time,
Mhm.
and you know, so that sketch is sort of, again, it's sort of adjacent to stand up. It's not.
Yeah.
There's some overlap, but
Yeah. So I did improv a little bit. I also like learned to write for sketch, and what you're saying and all that, there is some thing that at least there's some relatable thing to it that you can apply, but I guess directly not so much. But there's something that you can learn, you can use for it, right? When now I guess I'm just jumping to a different thing. What when you started, how long ago did you start stand up?
oh, so I've been doing it for 4 years.
4 years? Okay. So you even started before the boom was happening.
Mhm.
So you noticed how everything was starting to grow and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Where from your eyes, like how much of an, like how noticeable was that, like in the beginning, and then obviously like I've noticed a difference since I'm almost here like 2 years now, and I've noticed a difference like just in the span of time that I've been here.
Sure.
And I basically moved here for stand up, but you've been here from the beginning. Like, was there like is it like an exponential thing, or was it like like a big noticeable thing?
I mean, when I first was going, I went to Cherrywood a few times. I went to Mr. Tramp's.
Yeah.
That was like a really popular one. And then I went to Michelada's.
Yeah.
Well, that was after okay, so
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, I went over to the original Cap City,
Mm-hmm.
and I signed up for the Sunday mic and thinking I was going to get pulled.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, why didn't I get a spot and this and that?
Yeah.
And then I guess I went and saw a show at Esther's Follies.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, I met, let's see, I guess I met Hunter Duncan.
Mm-hmm.
He was hosting the Cherrywood.
Yeah.
And I signed up. And then, like, you know, I didn't see him again for a year or something. But, like,
Yeah.
that's kind of the first guy
Yeah.
who I recognized from doing it at that time.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I just did what everybody does. You go around to different
Mhm.
mics and you try
Yeah.
to meet some people. And
Yeah.
then I don't know. I went to the Micheladas mic after the pandemic, and like that Spencer Cavens was one of the first guys who kind of said, "Hey, what's going on?" And
Yeah.
that's where I met Max, and I met different people, and like
Yeah.
Dean.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything about anything.
Mhm.
I was just like, "Oh, okay. Well, these guys are doing comedy, you know."
Yeah.
They had one up in Round Rock that Dean was hosting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty normal. You just kind of start
Yeah.
doing it, and then all of a sudden, oh, there's a new comedy club. There's the Creek in the Cave over here, and then there's the Mothership, and then there's the Sunset. Then Cap City's open again.
Yeah.
And then, there's East Austin Comedy Club, and there's the Romo Room, and there's South Austin, and like I was like, oh, well, okay. To me, it made sense. Rogan's here,
Yeah.
so then, or I should say that there was a rumor that he was going to move here. And then I was like, oh, well, that would be kind of cool. I know he's got his gym down here.
Yeah.
And then when the Creek in the Cave moved down here, I was like, oh, like it's happening.
Yeah.
And then like I was involved with the Romo Room. Pat was running that, and Rob and stuff.
Yeah.
But I was just so like, oh, well, this is neat. And then all of a sudden it's like there's a lot of people doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because like I feel like I see at least 2 new people every day that I'm out at a mic or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
And so, like, you being here before it even happened, that's pretty interesting to me.
Well, but in some ways I was a new person too, so I didn't really see, like, I mean, there have been people here that have been here for 10, 20 years, and they probably really are just like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
But for me, I'm just like, oh, well, this is all new to me, so it just seemed exciting.
Okay.
And also it seemed like, well, right as the pandemic was winding down, the first mic I went to was like Micheladas or like Opa or something. So I thought, well, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then, the Lucky Duck opens or, the Baker Street. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then it's like clubs. And you're like, oh, wow. So it's really like the, taking off.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I like to go to one of the mics that you host that is very fun for me, the tag mic.
Oh, yeah.
How did you come up with that idea?
Oh, yeah. So anyways, so my first like year and a half of doing comedy, I wasn't getting a lot of laughs. Yeah. I was telling stories and I'd get people to kind of smirk a little bit. And I'm like, God, this isn't really, I mean, I'm doing it all right, but whatever. So I'm like, you know what? I don't have any punchlines. Yeah. I was like, zero. I don't even know how to write a punchline. Yeah. I don't even know what that is. So that's maybe the analytical part of me being like, okay, this is the deficiency. There's no punchlines. Yeah. So then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to have a mic where that's all we're doing. We're just going to write punchlines because I don't even know how to do it. And so through repetition, hopefully I'll figure it out. So then Pat, who ran the Roma Room, he had kind of an oddball mic slot that was like really unpopular. Yeah. It was like Fridays at like 4 or something, or Fridays at 5. So then I pitched this idea to him. I said, okay, we'll just, because I had just read, I don't know if it was the Comedy Bible or I read one of these books and they told me what a tagline is. I said, okay, we're just going to write tags and we'll see how that goes. Yeah. And so then the first, I don't know, 4 months, I was horrible at it. I would sit there. I explained the idea to everybody, and it basically hasn't changed. Yeah. But then we do it for an hour, and maybe in that hour, I could write 4 jokes. Yeah. And I'd sit there, and I was writing, but I was also recognizing that these are not punchlines. Yeah. So then over time, I was like, oh, okay. I'd get to where I could do 1 punchline like for everybody, and I was like, okay, that's pretty good. That's like 10 punchlines. Maybe they're not great, but like technically, technically they're jokes. So like, okay, good. And now I'm getting to the point where I can do, 5 a person in 4 minutes, and like maybe one of them's worth working on, but like technically they're all jokes. Yeah. So then when the Roma Room closed, I was like, man, I want to keep doing that tag mic. Yeah. But I don't really have a place to do it. Yeah. And then there was that big gap between the sign up for the Lucky Duck and the show. So I'm like, well, that's when I'll just do the tag mic there. We'll do it there. And then I pitched it to the Creek, and they did it for like a year. And then we had some scheduling trouble, so then I was like, well, I'll move it over to the Sunset Strip. Yeah. And if that doesn't work out, I'll do another one somewhere else, because like I have found it to be like essential. Yeah, no, it's because like even the roast battle last night, I'm just writing punchlines. So like if I hadn't done all those tag mics, it wouldn't.
Yeah, it would be a lot harder for you.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure too. Like, I've probably done 200 of those shows,
Mm-hmm.
and so every time I sit down, I'm writing 40 or 50 jokes twice a week for like 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't help but get better.
It's a incredible muscle you've built. Like whenever I do the tag mic, you're getting at least one laugh per person you're doing tags for.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Because like a solid joke like you usually have like 10 people, 10 solid jokes. That's really good, man. That's a pretty good average, I'd say.
Well, I can't write like that at home. Like I do my other kind of writing processes, but I call that spot writing. And like, there's something about the pressure. Like Robert and I, we put pressure on ourselves to really make sure we're doing it, because we're going to sit up there and like, eat shit if we don't.
Yeah.
So we better do it, So then but it's good kind of pressure, because it's like a low stakes environment, and where like anything goes. Like I say, listen, just come up with something. It doesn't have to be good.
Mm-hmm.
We're not trying to, good ideas, bad ideas. I do believe that's true.
Yeah.
But it's a quantity. So like if I wrote 50 jokes and 5 of them are good, 10%, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Like I feel like if you can do that throughout the whole thing, then you're good. I mean,
yeah. Well, what's your other writing process? Like, it seems like you have several.
Yeah, so I get up in the morning. If I don't have to write trivia, I'll do the morning pages.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 pages of free writing, and then I do the Write 10 from Hot Breath.
Okay. Well, I don't know that one.
Oh, so like there's this podcast called The Hot Breath,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Joel Byers, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Atlanta.
Okay.
And so he has a thing where he'll post like a word of the day. So I did it with Zach yesterday. The word was sad. And so then what you do is you put the word sad at the top of the page, and you set a timer for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you write jokes until the timer goes out. And all you have to do is use the word sad in there somewhere.
Does it have to be the actual word, or does it have to be related?
Well, you could say sadness, or you could say something, if it's a synonym or something.
Okay.
Or it could be about sadness if you wanted.
Okay.
But basically then you just write the 10 jokes. And then once the timer goes off, you read them over again and see if you could modify them or something.
Yeah.
Then I'll put a check mark by it if it's technically a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And then so then I just like throw all those away.
Okay. You never use those ever?
Well, I rarely. My polo joke came from doing that, but it's not a very good joke, but I just personally really like it,
Okay.
But basically that's not the point of it. So my thing is
just the muscle.
Right. So like I think of it like a boxer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so to be a good boxer, you've got to throw like thousands and thousands of punches.
Yeah.
But each of the punches themselves doesn't really have value. It's that you're now a good puncher.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of it that way. So then to me, I do that in the morning. Then I do whatever else I got to do. But I exercise, I take a nap and have a cup of coffee or something.
Yeah.
And then when I sit down and think about writing it around 4 or 5, if I've done that stuff in the morning, I feel like I get stuff. It like goes more when I go to sit down later.
And like actual sharp.
Well, I'm like
stuff.
queuing myself up to think about jokes.
Yeah.
And so then I think that tells your subconscious, hey, let's think about jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And then most of my stuff comes from that, but then I've had a few jokes that have come out of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think my strongest joke is the bucket list joke.
Mm-hmm.
And I was literally sitting there at the Sunset Strip. I was just watching some show, and it just like came to me all kind of like it was like done.
Yeah.
That's only happened like once or twice.
Yeah.
But those are like really good jokes.
Mm-hmm.
But like I don't know that I could increase that happening.
I feel like the more you do the other stuff you're doing, the more you get the inspirational stuff.
Yeah, I do think that if you're putting in the work of like doing all this stuff, that it is doing something to your brain. And then all of a sudden it'll just like, but I don't know if you could, there's probably a way to cue it up more that I just don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, there's got to be some, because I feel like the more that you do one thing, the more it happens. And it's like, how many hours a day are you spending writing?
Oh, like 3
hours. That's a lot, man.
Between trivia and like doing comedy, or like I was writing for the Weekly Wiper, or like Zach Black said he wants to get into writing insults.
Yeah. And
so I thought, again, this is being analytical. Well, what is a good insult? And I was like, well, then I started watching some on YouTube, and I was trying to find the common themes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like quick, Usually the setup's pretty basic.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll start with a compliment and then you'll hit them with a net,
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain principles of insults. So I like wrote all that down.
Yeah.
And then I just started writing insults.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be like, you're tall. And I'd be like, okay, how can you insult someone for being tall?
Yeah.
You're short, you're smart, you're stupid, you're nice looking, whatever.
Yeah.
So then I just like would write those for 10 minutes. And then when I'd get done, I'd just like send them to Zach just to like have some accountability.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, like when I was writing the roast battle jokes to go up against Sammy, so I wrote like 50 jokes.
Yeah.
And then, I'd go to the mics and I'd test them out and stuff. And then I'd refine them. But so the tag writing definitely supported doing that kind of writing.
Yeah. And have you, like, I feel like, I just feel like you can still do that tag writing at home, but is it just no, you need the pressure for it.
I don't know why. It's something about it. Like, well, so like when I'm at the Lucky Duck and I'm hosting, not the tag mic, but the regular mic, I'm doing that too.
Yeah.
I'm watching the comedian.
Yeah.
And I want to pick out something from their set that I'm going to write a tag on.
Yeah.
And then I deliver it immediately.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of cheating because what I'm sampling from them is where's the audience laughing?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to write my joke on that. So the chances that I'm going to get a laugh on the thing they already laughed at is so much higher.
Yeah.
So that helps. And like, well, and two, I write for another comedian like professionally now.
Mm-hmm.
And so him and I will go back and forth on Zoom and then we'll punch up his stuff. And so that makes me think I can write in his voice now because I've worked with him for a while.
Yeah.
But then it also makes me think about what my voice is. So that's what I try to do at the tag mic too. Like, I'm not writing a joke for me.
You're someone else's voice.
Right. So like for me, I can't write like that at home because I'm not getting that other person's voice coming in.
I getcha. But that's interesting the way that you're looking at it from your point of view. Like, oh, what is my voice? Do you think about that a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, you're good.
No, I do. So I've kind of identified a couple things that are like, I have to have it in my jokes, or else it isn't like my voice.
Yeah.
So one of them is failure. It has to have an element of failure. And then nihilism. There needs to be an optimistic nihilism to it.
Yeah.
And then if it's a little bit silly.
Yeah.
If I can hit those three, then it's like a joke that I can do well.
Yeah.
And that's different than just a regular joke.
That's pretty interesting. I've never looked at it that way. I mean, I'm probably still figuring out my voice, right?
Well, it takes time to understand it, So like, I'm an optimistic nihilist in my real life. And so if my joke has a certain amount of nihilism, it's very natural for me to have those kinds of statements and thoughts.
Yeah. What I have noticed is that like I do typically write about a few things, and then I just keep recycling them in some sort of way. So I guess I kind of have that.
Yeah.
But I still haven't pinpointed like, because sometimes I always write about sex. I don't want to be writing about sex all the time. So I'll put a fork in that for a little bit, and then I'll go into something else. Do you feel like you find that, or you just like, okay, this I like writing about this, so I'll just keep writing about that?
Well, I don't always know what I'm going to be writing about. Like I got some chocolate almonds with Tina, and then I was like, well, this is pretty funny, because again, from what I like to write, I want to write something that's like so boring that other comedians aren't going to even touch that topic.
Yeah.
So like I'm trying to figure out what's funny about Sudoku right now, and nothing's coming to me. So it's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, if I do find something, it's going to be really good. Yeah. Because even me looking at Sudoku right now, there's nothing funny about it. Yeah. Or what was another one I was? Oh, the fidget spinners. I was doing stuff with that, and I was like, "There's nothing funny about fidget spinners." Okay, that's good. I want that as a.
That's your baseline.
Yeah. Well, like, have you ever heard? So Jerry Seinfeld had said there's a difference between a comic and a comedian.
I've kind of heard that, but I don't know the difference though.
Well, so like a comic is a person who's technically a technician, and they're telling a good joke, and the joke is good and it works. Yeah. But then to transcend into being a comedian it has to do something with you. Oh. It's got to be either your life experience or your personality or whatever. And that's really the only way to personalize and patent and have it be just for you. Yeah. So like there's some jokes that I do that other comedians can't because they don't have my worldview and they don't have my whatever persona or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, yeah. So whenever I'm writing a joke, I think it's got to at least be a joke. You know, but then how can I push it more towards that comedian type joke?
Yeah.
And some of them don't, and so then they end up getting thrown away.
So any joke that someone else could do, you just throw it away?
Well, I look at it and I say, could somebody else do this joke? And if the answer is yes, then I need to personalize it more.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I always find myself writing something about either what interests me or something personal, which at the end of the day, everything is like personal because it like there's something that you're like into, right? But I never looked at it that way that you're telling me, and I probably should start doing that.
Well, like if you're writing a sketch, like we both know how to do, you hand the script to somebody else and they can do it.
Yeah.
What you want to be able to do is you write your jokes out and you hand it to somebody and they can't do it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
Like I've got 8 minutes on coins.
Yeah, I don't think anybody.
Right. So like to me, I was like, this is great. Like I think coins are useless. So there's the failure part.
Yeah.
And the fact that I collect them off the ground is like neurotic.
Yeah.
And also nobody cares.
Yeah.
Oh, it's perfect. So a lot of times with a comic, you want to address the why of something as a comedian.
Yeah.
To me, the why is there is no why in that particular bit.
Yeah.
So that's frustrating for people.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, what are we working towards?
Yeah.
No.
No, there's
what's the why of it? If they're asking that in their head, why are you telling me this?
Yeah.
Then I've got them.
Yeah.
Because there isn't one. You know? So that's like a stylistic thing I do. You know?
Okay.
And that to me is part of, well, our entire lives have no meaning.
Yeah.
So, like, so if you catch on, then you know. So all of mine have that through line of like,
yeah.
Why are you telling me this? Like,
yeah. I never thought like when you tell that coin bit, I never thought of it that way, but now I do though. So it's something like, oh, I can't unsee that now. But
right, like there's nothing about coins that are necessary.
Yeah.
We do not need them. It's actually a burden on society.
Yeah.
It costs the government money. They lose money printing pennies and nickels.
And I never really liked coins. I never carry coins because they're annoying to carry. So
yeah,
I always
well, getting rid of them is difficult.
Yeah, because you can't. Can you recycle a coin?
I mean, you probably could.
No, I guess you can use it as cash for.
But even if you gather up a bunch of coins like I do, and you get them in a jar, then you got to go to the coin star or something.
Yeah.
So like, really, in any interaction with a coin is a type of failure. So that's where it's like, to me, the whole thing is just dripping with failure. Yeah. Because the entire enterprise is a failure, and then each little part of it is a failure, and then the question is, why are you even doing this? Yeah. Great. Oh, yeah, I like
that. That's a fun way of looking at it, man. One last thing I'd like to address, like you have a wonderful head of hair.
Oh, thank you.
But you always like have a cap. Before we started talking in real life, as you said, you were like, well, you kind of answered my question, but I'll ask it again for the camera. So like. Why do you cover such a magnificent head of hair?
Oh yeah, I get that a lot. Well, so the Barton Springs Saloon gave me a hat as part of my trivia contract. Yeah. So I wear it to like promote the bar. Okay. And then for the Lucky Duck, I also have a hat. So like that's the easiest way for me to promote the place. Okay. And then so like I have a hat for the Creek. I have a hat for. I'll probably get one for Sunset Strip or whatever. Yeah. And at some point I'll have a big fat cock hat. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily that I'm into hats. It's just I feel like it's a way to kind of be a promoter. Okay. You know?
Also, like you have a Labatt's blue hat.
Oh, I love Labatt's blue.
Yeah, I love Labatt's blue too. So that's so I feel like I have like a sort of a Midwestern upbringing in a way, because like the part of Canada that I was in, it was basically the border with Michigan. Yeah. So it was always like a back and forth between those two. So I always had like that sort of kinship with you, in that sense. I'd like to, now that you brought the big fat cock up. So it's funny. Before I moved to Austin, I started listening to Kill Tony. Sure. And I remember like vividly someone on Kill Tony talking about their big fat cock. I'm like, what the fuck is this guy going up on stage talking about his big fat cock? But the more I heard the jokes, I'm like, oh man, this guy's funny. And it got funnier and funnier. Right. But I never put those two and two together that it was you. And I'd been going to your mics for a while. Mm-hmm. And then when you started doing the Big Fat Cock book, I'm like, hold on a minute, is it? You're the Big Fat Cock guy? So I looked it up. I'm like, oh man, it is you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting because like I'd known you for a few months now, but it never in my head. I thought, oh, you're that guy.
Right.
So that was pretty fun for me.
Well, I had that happen actually. So like, I went out to do these little shows in Ohio, and I needed a piece of merch.
Yeah.
Because you know, it's expensive, and you want to try to break even or make a little bit. So I got the books together. So I go out and do this show, and it's at a pizza place outside of a truck stop. You know? And the guy who was supposed to be the headliner couldn't make it. So I'm the headliner now, and I'm like, oh, geez. So I'm doing, I think I did 20 minutes or something. And then, so for the last 2 minutes, I did all my Big Fat Cock jokes as my closer so I could pitch the book, you know. Well, people in the audience are watching, and they're having fun, and they're liking it or whatever. But then once I started doing those jokes, they're like,
we've heard these before.
That's the guy from Kill Tony, which is crazy because that was a year after that appearance. You know?
Yeah.
So, like, it's very strange. So they don't know anything about me, what I look like, you know, any of my other jokes, but those, they're like, that's that guy. So, like, that came out of, again, as a fluke.
Yeah.
You know? And it is funny to me, like.
Yeah, it's hilarious, dude.
When it breaks some rules of comedy, you know.
Yeah. I mean, rules are made to be broken at the same time, right? So, do you do those Big Fat Cock jokes always in your sets now, or is it like depending on the situation?
Certain shows.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm out of town, I'll do it more because I feel like in town people pretty much heard them.
They know them.
And if it's a clean show, I don't do it. You know.
Yeah.
But I did the big Texas showcase at Sunset and I closed with that, and then I sold like 10 joke books. So I was like, well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good way to sell merch, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty fun, man. Dude, I've had a really fun time talking to you. So, is there anything that you'd like to plug on this? Like any?
Oh yeah, I should. I look at the camera there. The fucking Toxic Masculinity shows on Friday, you know, and I got the Midwest Maniacs coming up in June at the Velveeta Room, so that's pretty cool. And come to the Tag Mic. You know, we don't always get a lot of audience.
Yeah. It's such a huge difference when there's an audience there.
Yeah.
Because like you know the comedians already are not paying that. Either we are paying attention, but I don't know if we're just dead inside and we just don't laugh or whatever it is. But like I'm looking at people, I'm like, oh, this is funny, but I don't audibly laugh for some reason. So when there's actual people, they're like, oh, these are actually funny. Okay, but
well, I find myself saying pretty good a lot.
Yeah. Every time you do that, I laugh, man. I'm like, oh, pretty good.
Right, because like you say, you're not like naturally laughing because it's like we're not thinking of it the same way as an audience would.
Yeah.
But I do want to indicate in some way that it's funny.
Yeah, and also the other thing with the Tag Mic is like we're actually thinking about writing jokes. So it's even harder to get any sort of like audible response. But I really do enjoy your mics, man. It's something that it's helped me a lot in a way too. What's your Instagram?
Oh, it's the Mob Schaub.
The Mob Schaub. Is there a story behind the mob?
Oh yeah, so in 10th grade, I ran for student council, and you know you got to come up with some kind of slogan. And so not a lot of things rhyme with Schaub, you know. So I said, "Join the mob, vote for Schaub." Yeah. And then I had a bunch of mobster guys on my posters. So then the principal came around and he took them all down. He says, "Well, we can't have a Italian criminal smoking a cigar on the posters." I was like, "Oh, the cigar's the problem." So I printed off a bunch more with a different mobster. Yeah. And then he's like, "Well, we just can't have like crime figures on your posters, you know." So I was pissed. I was like, "This is election tampering or whatever." Yeah. And then I'm like, "Well, that kind of is cool." So then I was like, I became like the Mob Schaub, you know. Okay. And then I just started using it, you know. That's a lot of fun, man. Well, thank you for coming on, dude. I appreciate you. It was a good time. Thanks for the coffee too. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba.